Welcome and thank you for joining us today. I am Parna, host of Beyond 1 Million Fireside Chat, strategies to grow your company irrespective of the industry you are in. In these segments, I have the privilege of speaking with entrepreneurs and experts on what it takes to scale and transform a business to 5 million and beyond. My guest today is Helen Greiner, co-founder of iRobot. She is a serial entrepreneur and a staunch supporter of the startup ecosystem, especially in the world of robotics. Welcome, Helen.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, we have known each other, I feel like forever. When you hired me right before the iRobot IPO, and a lot has happened since. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I've always loved robots. Ever since I was 10, I've loved robots. I saw Star Wars on the big screen and fell in love with R2-D2. Decided that's what I wanted to do and decided I wanted to do it at MIT. So I was very fortunate. I got accepted there. And a great place. I learned a huge amount of engineering, but they didn't really know how to build good robots. So after,
A lot of companies still don't know how to build good robots.
yeah. And universities, right? But that's good. Universities should be working on stuff that's 10, 20 years out, not stuff that's current. So we started the company right out of grad school at MIT, myself, Rod Brooks, and Colin Angle.
That's really cool. So, what was the incentive that kind of drove you and Colin and Rod to build the robots?
Mhm. Well, for myself, I wanted to build robots, and I looked around, and I could either go to a government lab, a NASA lab, stay at university, but there were no companies doing robots. So, I really, we wanted there to be a place where you could basically build robots for a living.
Yeah, that is so cool. And who knew RTD2 could be such an inspiration, right? That and the Jetsons and all the stories that we used to hear, and then you helped kind of bring them all to life. So that is super
It was
cool.
it was crushing as a child to find out that there was a Kenny Baker played R2-D2 that he wasn't actually very robotic.
For sure. So every startup has their challenges for sure, and especially when you're building like a hardware. So what are some of the challenges that you remember facing when you were just thinking about launching iRobot and building the products?
Well, we had pretty much every single challenge along the way. First of all, we were just, kids out of grad school and really didn't have that much business experience. There weren't entrepreneurship classes like there are today at most of the universities. And it really took us a while to get going because we had to learn along the way, not just about how to build a good robot, but how to run a good business.
Right. And how about funding? Because you probably needed a lot of capital to build the products, right? It's not just a software.
Well, we didn't know that, so that's good. Well, we basically scaled up by bootstrapping. We didn't raise money for the first 8 years at iRobot, and we didn't really try. And I think if we had tried, we would have been turned down because the environment wasn't like it was today. Like people were looking for folks with experience if they're going to try and start a company. It wasn't just out of school that you could start a company and get funding. So we didn't try for the first 8 years, and then 8 years in, we started raising some capital. And that really allowed us to build the robots we wanted to build rather than any robot for money, which was how we were working before that.
Yeah. I think that is really smart because that is, I think, a mistake that you see a lot of startups making today. And, it's like, okay, we have this idea, let's just go raise funds, and then they just dilute their company. So that definitely was a really
I'm actually
smart.
glad we didn't raise a lot of money up front because we would have burned through it without having that killer idea with a good market need behind it. It allowed us to, really experiment with it, what would work, what wouldn't work. And our growth was, it was very, very small, but it was always going up every year. For example, it took us 4 years to get to the first million. It took us 8 years to get to the first 5 million. And that's when we started raising capital.
That's definitely a good, you kind of are giving our listeners a really good view of what it takes to get to that 1 million and then five, right? So was there a certain event or milestones that led you to say, okay, we've made it as a company now?
I didn't think we made it until we took it public. That was my event.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, that was a lot of work, and yes, that and I think after the IPO, one of the things that I remember very fondly is working with you to help create that robot ecosystem because there wasn't any ecosystem whatsoever, right?
Right. Now, of course, that's not really the measure of success of a company, but we'd worked so hard and we'd taken investment from folks at the time of the IPO, we'd done it for 7 years. And I felt very strongly about having them have some liquidity in their investment to really do the right thing for the investors and also the other stakeholders like the employees and the customers. We were able to do so much more once we went public because we had the capital. And the employees, a lot of them told me it was really life-changing for them, whether it was paying for their kids to go to school or, putting a down payment on a house and doing all these things that, everybody at iRobot owns stock and it really made a difference in their lives.
Yeah, I can vouch for that too. So thank you. So walk us through when you talk about taking the company from 1 to 5 million, that it took you 4 years to get to 1 million or 8 years to get to five. Share with the audience some of the challenges that you faced in that critical time of 1 to 5 million, please.
Well, first of all, it shouldn't take you this long. You should start with a business plan. You should start with a need that needs to be fulfilled in the world, one that you have some familiarity with, or you've done some, really strong research behind. We didn't have that at iRobot. We started with the idea of we want to make robots. And so, we started out any robot for money phase. And so we would get government contracts in, which actually takes a lot of work to convince the government that you're the right people, that you have to win them through a competitive bid. So we would get government contracts in. We worked with some large Fortune 500 companies, basically would say, we bring the technology and the robotics, you bring the marketing expertise and the money, and we'll go on together and we'll make a joint venture or just keep it internal to their company. And so we did that. And we had multi-million-dollar contracts from them, and it never, ever went to the final. It either, got cut before it went to production, or something happened along the way. The person at the large company moved to a different position. Or with one, we actually got it on the market, but it wasn't a success, and then it wasn't marketed anymore. And so it was really kind of heartbreaking in a way to have all these like almost there, but not quite getting there. I think there's applications, we did robots for downhole oil wells. We did large scale cleaning robots, for stores. We did toys for Hasbro. We did museum robots. We did military robots. We did end up working out very well. And there were just so many different types of robots we had tried along the way until we finally picked consumer robots and the military robots.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point you just made about finding market fit, right?
Mhm.
Because you have to, like most entrepreneurs, I think that is something they all struggle with is, where's the market fit? As
Right.
founders, we feel like this is the right market to go to, and then you have to pivot until you find the right one. So
But
I,
we had one venture capitalist who we were trying to, close. He would pound the table and he'd say, you have to stop everything else you're doing and just do this. And the particular one he was pounding the table on was the large scale cleaning robots. And that's really good, right? I mean, it's a great market for robots. It's a great application, but it was before its time. And if we had listened to him and taken his money, we wouldn't have gotten to where we're going. So you really do have to figure out, and I would do it even before you start. Figure out product market fit. Figure out that there's a real need for what you're going to build. Because in robotics and in hardware in general, you spend a lot of money to build it. And it's not a question, it's not like build it and they will come, right? You really have to make sure you're fulfilling a need for the person and have asked them along the way, will you buy this? And people will lie. People will say, yeah, I'll buy it. You really need some kind of a way to distinguish a let's be friendly with, I would really take out my wallet and pay cash for this.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Another thing that you mentioned was trying to get government contracts. So one of the companies that I serve as an advisor to, we're kind of looking at how do we get the government contracts versus taking investor money this early on.
Mhm.
Do you have any tips for startups who has a good product, they need the funding to continue to build, but not take the VC money, but look for government grants? Like what should they be looking for? And is that a good option for, let's say, another robotics company?
Well, I can't say in a particular situation, but it definitely worked for iRobot and it's worked for a lot of other companies. It's non-dilutive funding, so you don't have to give up any equity in the company. And if you're in the right place, it can result in large scale orders, as it did for iRobot. We got orders, hundreds of millions of dollars at a time for the military robots. So it can work out, but I think the caution is don't just like look at a solicitation and respond to it. You have to really do your homework. You have to get to know the people. You should have made a visit to them. You have to see if what you're selling is what they need. And if you don't do that, if you're just responding to solicitations, you might win. You might get lucky. Lightning might strike, but
Yeah.
it's not really a solid way to do business.
Yeah, you're right. I think relationships, especially with the government and the military, is so important because they have to have faith and trust and
Right.
the and understand what the product can do for for the country or the people serving and so on. So
And why you're the best one to give the money to, why you're going to come through. It's something that I assume is very challenging because, they have a lot of people who take the money and don't don't deliver.
right, right. No, that's really good. Good point. So, since iRobot, you have taken on so many different roles. So, do you want to just share really quickly some of the areas that you have, that you had leadership role or and also served as a CEO or a founder? And also, what are some of the lessons learned through your journey?
Well, after iRobot, I decided, well, the best part of iRobot was when the Roomba was being designed and when the Packbot was being designed. I like it when you're building something the likes of which the world hasn't seen before. That's something that was very, very enjoyable to me. And I decided I wanted to do that again. So did a startup in the drone space at the time, which was 2008. Drones were pretty new. They had some fixed wing flying drones around, but they didn't have the capability of the small agile drones that are very common today. So I started that company and we were doing quite well. We got some government grants. We got into rapid equipping. We had some designs for consumer version, and I did raise venture capital for it. And unfortunately, I got the wrong VCs, and they decided that it wasn't going quick enough or had bumps along the way, which all companies do, and decided that they would bring in another CEO. And so I basically lost control of it to the VCs. At which point, that'll be fine if they make it successful, but they had very, very little business idea, especially about the military business. One of them told me, I'm speaking gobbledygook when I'm telling them about the military acquisition process. I was like, goodness. So I decided it wasn't going anywhere. Like I tried to help them, but I decided it wasn't going anywhere. And I took a job in the Pentagon. The person who had originally deployed the iRobot Packbot over in Afghanistan and got the first robots out in combat, he had taken the job as the Army acquisition executive and asked me to go in and be a highly qualified expert for the drone and robotics program. So I went and I did that, which was really eye-opening to see how the sausage is made in the Pentagon and how the programs are running. But I wasn't really in the operational line. Like I wasn't able to make decisions. I was basically just giving advice, which was a great position, but not really what I wanted to do for a long time. And then COVID struck and commuting to the Pentagon was no longer as much of an option. So I jumped in to a company that some friends had started. In fact, the person who came up with the idea for the Roomba, Joe Jones, had come up with an idea for a garden weeding robot. And I said, weeding, that's something I do a lot of because I'm a gardener. And I jumped in to be the CEO of that and help them raise money. But eventually We just unfortunately decided that it was better merged to a agricultural company, Harvest Automation, because although we sold a lot of robots, it just wasn't high enough market demand to, continue to make the kind of improvements and do the kind of engineering we would like to do.
No, those are definitely the life of an entrepreneur, right?
But it's such a wonderful product. I'm so sad that it's discontinued as a gardener because you can put it in the garden at the beginning of the growing season and you don't have to do the weeding. It's wonderful.
No, it is. I
You
don't
have
know.
to do just a little bit of weeding.
Yeah, yeah, no, totally. It is. And I don't know if you know, but I had the privilege of working with Joe Jones and the team to help launch
Yeah.
Turtle. So it
Oh, you
was,
did a great job on that launch, by the way.
thank you. I appreciate that. It's great teamwork. So, as part of the different organizations and companies that you have built and grown, were there scenarios when you realize that the idea is great that you've come up with or the founding team has come up with, but now you need to scale the team or grow the company? What are some of the triggers where you say, okay, we've taken or built the product as far as we can, now it's time to bring in other experts?
Right. Well, that happened a little bit at iRobot with the Roomba, right? We had a team of wonderful people build the first generation and get it on the market, but then it really needed people that had more expertise in production and modularity and making things really tight rather than the inventor types. And so we had to find those people and bring them on board as well. Same thing for the military, right? We had great people inventing. There's a unique design for one of the military robots that allowed it to climb stairs when nothing else could. And that was wonderful. But we did have to bring on people that were very familiar with the military operations, right? How they would actually be used in the field and the requirements that will be put on them.
That's great. I know we've covered a lot of different topics, but if you were to give one tip to an entrepreneur who is looking to grow their startup from 1 to 5 million, what would it be?
Start with product market fit. Figure out if you really have it before you build it. And really just ask yourself, is it a big enough market for where I want to go? So that goes beyond the 5 million, right? Is this, you're going to spend a lot of time, you can spend all your waking hours on this. Is this what I want to be doing? Can it be really large? And if not, it might not be the right opportunity. And that doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean it can't work as a lifestyle company. But if you want to, raise venture capital and you want to take it to, a global scale, you have to make sure it's the right opportunity. Even everything starts with product market fit. I mean, like the companies that fail, like everything's fixable except product market fit. You can hire the wrong staff, you can, change them, you can, you can raise money from other sources, right? You can change your design, you can fix anything that happens except for product market fit. You really have to get that, at least for your initial entry model.
So really, really sage advice. So before I let you go, you are obviously super steeped in the world of robotics and you're very involved with different startups and organizations. What's your prediction for the robotics and automation industry going forward?
Well, I mean, I think like everyone else, including the CEO of NVIDIA, robotics is the future. Everything will be robotics as he in the future. Everything that moves will be robotic, as the CEO of NVIDIA said. But I do worry that people are going to very, very complicated robots very quickly. And I'm not sure that the market will be there when they get there. That doesn't mean I think it won't happen in the future. I think it will, but I think it's going to have some smaller steps along the way and get the cost down to what the market will be willing to pay. Very, very happy to be wrong on this one. I'd love a humanoid running around my house in the next few years. So I think that there's always like ups and downs in the robot field, but I don't think it's ever going to be a long-term issue because I think robots, the only way to get a lot of jobs done that humans shouldn't be doing today is through robotics. So I think it's a really, really strong bet in the long term.
I think that's really well said because I remember even a few years back, anytime you talk about robots, people will say, oh, they're going to replace humans. And finally, I think that we've gotten to the point that people realize that it's collaborative.
Yeah.
it's cobots, so the world of cobots, and they're here to help us, like you said, do the dull, dirty, dangerous work so that people can upskill and do more strategic work. And I think that's what the world of AI is right now. Well, AI is going to take over our jobs. So it's kind of like you said, it's a cycle, right?
Right, right. Although I wouldn't want to be an entry-level programmer today because it can really do it.
That's true. Anything else you'd like to add before we
Um,
wrap?
Nothing jumps to mind. I would just say product market fit. I have to beat that drum. It's like if you don't have that, it doesn't matter what else you do. Like all the other things can be fixed, but product market fit, you gotta figure that out. Mhm.
Excellent. Helen, I so appreciate you taking the time to chat with me and sharing your journey with the audience and the sage advice that you're giving the current entrepreneurs and budding entrepreneurs. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, and have a good one.
You too.